This is Gemara Zevachim, Daf Tes Zayin. We began the new parak in the previous year, and we pick it up from the Gemara on the bottom of Tes Vavim and Beis, 2 lines from the bottom. We like all the learning to be an incredible schos refuah shlema for Gabriel Simcha b'Miriam Ahuva. Emir Hashem, the Koyach HaTaira should bring Gabriel Simcha b'Miriam Ahuva a incredible refuah shlema. So we began the second parak yesterday, a parak that began contrasting the first parak with the second parak. The first parak was all about kol zevachim shenizbichu sheloi lishman. Any carbon that was shechted sheloi lishman. The halacha was it was kasherin el shlei alu l'baylam l'shem chayva. This parak now begins kol zevachim shekiblan daman, that the Kabbalah particularly was done. Now we have to add on, yesterday we learned the Mishnah Pashib Shat that the Kabbalah was done, but the Mefarshim here explain this is not just the Kabbalah, this is any of the next 3 Avodas. This is the Kabbalah, this is the Zrika, and this is the Hailacha. And we began the Gemara by explaining the Makar for the first psul in the Mishnah. And again, it's important to realize that in this Mishnah, the Lashon that is used is pasul. In the previous Mishnah, the Lashon that was used was kosher. Now we're saying all these Zevachim, Shekiblan Daman, by whom? And again, we just explained, it's Lav Dafka Kabbalah, it's Zrika, it's Hailacha. If it's done by any one of the list in the Mishnah, any of those people, the halacha is pasul, which again, pasul is a much stronger lashon that we're going to get to. So we began the Gemara yesterday that discussed the Makar from Zar. How do we know that if a Zar performs the Avaidais, that the halacha is going to be, it's going to be pasul? And we had one Makar. We continue 3 lines from the bottom, the last word of line Devei, moving on to 2 lines from the bottom, Rabbi Yishmael Tana. Another Makar, that if a Zar, again a Zar being a non-Kayin, performs the Avaidah, it's going to be pasul, says the Gemara Asya, Bakal V'chaymer mi Balmum. It's a Kal V'chaymer, Ma Balmum Sha'ichel. A Balmum is allowed to eat. A Kayin who's a Balmum is Eichel. He's allowed to eat Kachim im Avad yet. If he performs Avaida, what's the halacha? Chilel. He messes up the Avaida. He cannot do an Avaida when he's a Balmum. Continues the Gemara on the top of Tezayinam and Aleph. Zar. If we have a Zar, which? What's the halacha of a Zar? The halacha is Sheinoi Oichel. A Zar is not allowed to eat karbanos. Einoi din shemavad chilel. Is it not a kal v'chaymer that if they can't even eat the karban, certainly their avodah should be pasul? There should be no less than a balmum. So is the kal v'chaymer from balmum. This is Tvei Rav Yishmael's Mikar. Ask the Gemara 1 second. Mal balmum shkein asa bakarav kemakriv. Balmum has its level of chumrah. In that what? The karav is like the makriv. That there's a paslus of balmum in the carbon itself. That if a carbon has a balmum, it's also pasul. Whereas that is not true when it comes to, and it's not relevant when it comes to the other ideas that we're discussing. It's not relevant when it comes to a Zar. Says the Gemara, Tami Yachiach. So Tami is going to prove you that what? Rashi fills in the blanks that we don't make the Karev Kimakif. Why not? Because an animal is not Mekabel Tomo when it's alive. And yet, if the Kayin is Tameh, it's going to mess it up. So what do we see? We see that even though the carbon is not the same status as the person, still, Alma, as Rashi ends off, Tameh Sha'avad, will be Chila, and therefore we'll be able to learn out to Zar. But ask the Gemara, wait, malatame, but kame as his chomra, shkin metame. Toma is its own chiddush that what? It's able to metame. Says the Gemara, balmom yerchiach. Therefore, from the combination of balmum, from the combination of Tomei, says the Gemara, we're going to be able to learn out to our din. A balmum chazer adin la rizeh krizev la krizeh krizeh ha'atzad hashava shebehem. The common denominator between the two, the common denominator is that they're not allowed to perform both a balmum and a tamei, or muzar, they're warned, they're not allowed to perform the avaida, and v'mavdoi chilulai, afani avizar, I'm going to bring and learn out from this kalvachaymer, for this sada shaveh, azar and ankayin shu muzar, v'mavad chilel, and if it performs the avaida, it's going to be machalel, it's going to mess it up. So says the Gemara, a second mikar, that if a zar performs avoidais, it's going to be puzzle. Asks the Gemara, Minalandim Mozar, from where do we know that a non-kayin is Mozar, is warned not to perform the avodah? Maybe Nazru, if you learn out from the pasuk of Nazru, Chilel, Begufei, Ksevei. Says the Gemara, the pasuk also writes that it is mechalel, so it's explicit in that pasuk. Ella, but rather mivizar liikrav aleichem. We learn it out from there. But ask the Gemara, Yikalam Ifrach. Okay, so now you're telling me you're learning it out from a tzad shaveh. But wait, if the tzad shaveh itself has a level of chumrah, you can't learn from there either. Ask the Gemara, Yikalam Ifrach, Mal tzad shaveh sheben. Shkein lo yotru bebama. The tzad shaveh, balma and tameh are what? They're not hotra bebama. A bama being a mizbeach outside of the Beis Hamikdash. There's bama gedayla, there's bama ketana. But says the Gemara, one who is tameh, one who is a balmum, is not a hutar bama. However, when it comes to a zar, there's no iser by a zar bringing on a bama. So we cannot equate one to the next. Says the Gemara, Loi tema tame yechiach, ela ema einin yechiach. Says the Gemara, okay, you're right. Let's bring in a new case. Let's bring in a case of an einin, a case in which someone whose relative was nifter. Mal einin shkein aser b'maiser. Says Mara, wait, einin has its own chumrah. It's not like maiser sheni. Balmum yochiach. V'chazir din lo krizas. You learn from balmum and an einin to a zar. That's how the shav shavem shemazar and v'chulu. Ask the Gemara, but wait, we could ask the same kasha. Hachenami lifraich. We could as well ask malas how the shav shavem shkin lo otru b'bamais. So we have the same kasha, whereas a non-kayin zar has no problem eating or no problem performing a vaida on a bama. Says the Gemara, wait, Maskevla Rav Sama, and again, Rav Sama is asking, Breder Rav is asking a kasha on the kasha that we just said. We just asked on the tzad shaveh shebehem of Hotra b'bama. Asked Rav Sama Breder Rava, Uman leimalan and Dainin Aser b'bama. Who told you that an Ainin is Aser b'bama? Dilma Shari b'bama. And therefore, the Gemara is concluding that we'll indeed have our second mikar for the pastels of Azar is going to be the tzadashava from Einin and Baal Mum. Rav Misharshia Amar, a third mikar, Asi Kalvachaymer, Mi Yoshev. Clearly Kalvachaymer from Yoshev, we're towards the bottom half of the Amar, the first line is Misharshia. Ma Yoshev Sha'oichel, Im Avar Chilol. A Yoshev, someone who sits, you're allowed to eat your karbanos when you're Yoshev. And yet, im avad, if one does the avodah while sitting, chilel, zar, she'ino yoichel, a zar, which is not allowed to eat the karbanos, ein oidim, shem avad, ol vichilel. But ask him our way, mali yoshev came pasol leidos. A yoshev is not allowed to give edus. You learn this Gemara in Sanhedrin, you're not allowed to give edus when you're sitting. Says the Gemara, mi yoshev tamach chacham. We learn it out from a Talmid Chacham who is Yoshev. Because a Yoshev Talmid Chacham is allowed to give Eidos while sitting. Says Gemara, B'wei Malish Shem Yoshev Shkeim Basel Le'eidos. The concept of Yosef, so even though you're finding me a case of a Talmid Chacham, but says the Gemara, the concept of Be'etzem is a Chumrah. Says the Gemara, Shem Yosef Le'parach, that's not a Kasha. V'imtim Shleimar Parach, and you can tell me it is a Kasha. Asem Yosef u'mechada me'hanach. We learn from Yosef and one of the other ones, either a Balmum or an Oinen or a Tami. The Yosef the Kasha b'mama b'nalan. So now the Gemara anticipates a kasha that could have been asked, because one of the kashas we asked in the Tzad HaShaveh was Hotra b'bama. So this whole new limud would only work if a Yoshev is kasha b'bama. Amar Kra Lamad Lefnei Hashem L'Sharsa Lefnei Hashem V'Loi Lefnei Bama. That the whole Mekar of standing during the Avodah is Lefnei Hashem, and therefore that will not apply by a Bama. So three different Mekairos that we learn out the din in the Mishnah that a zar that performs the Avodah will passel. And the Mishnah continue with an Einin. An Einin passels the Avodah min Allah. Says the Gemara, min HaMikdash lo yitzei v'lo yechalel. Says the Torah that from the Beis HaMikdash he should not leave. This pasuk is referring to if a Kohen Gadol b'shas Avodah becomes an Einin, he should not leave and rather continue serving. So what's the obvious diuk? Ha'achar shelo yatsa chilo, that dafka Kohen Gadol ha'acher aksam kohen, he would have to leave, and if not, he will be machalal, he will passel up the Avodah Makar number one. Rav Elazar Amar Mi'acha, second kar hin ekrivu, says the Torah, hein hikrivu, and Aaron is telling to Moshe, was it they brought the carbon? Ani krafti, I'm the one that brought the carbon. So says the Gemara, Aaron HaKohen responding to Moshe Rabbeinu. From here we see that Aaron was one that brought the carbon. So we see the fact that they were Einanim is not, sorry, I keep on losing my mic over here. The fact that they were Einanim was a problem. Ask the Gemara Mechlal, 5 lines to the bottom, the Inu Ikriv Shabir. Sounds like that if they would have brought the carbon, Shabir Ishtiroif, it would have made sense why he was burned. This is the pasuk by the death of Nadav and Avihu. So it sounds like that they only had a kasha because Aaron brought it b'shas aninos. But if they would have understood why it would have been burned. So we see that a carbon b'shas aninos would passel. Rav Elazar, my time Amar, asked the Gemara, why didn't Rav Elazar use the second sheet to learning it out from Aaron HaKohen? Why didn't he learn out from Muvimin HaMikdash Lo Yitzei? Amar Lacha responds Rav Elazar, Miksiv. Does the pasuk say Ha'achar Shlo Yatsa Chalel? The pasuk doesn't speak of the diuk. She doesn't want to learn out from the diuk. Ve'edach and Tanakama Maite Lamar Meheni Krivu. Because Avram Neitama Nisrafa, that had nothing to do with bringing B'shas Aninos, had to do with bringing it when they were Tamei, and therefore it's not a Makar at all. And that's going to be our Machlokes, how we learn out that an Einain that performs the Avodah is going to be Pasel. And a third Makar, Rabbi Yishmael in the last line, Tan Asif Kavachimer Mi Balmum. Oh ma Balmum, as you turn over to Zayin and base. Shoichel. A Balmum again, as we just learned a few moments ago. A Kain who's a Balmum is allowed to eat karbanos. So ma dacha Kain. That's Balmum Shoichel. Im avad im messes up chilel. Einin shein oichel. Einin is not allowed to eat. As Rashi quotes, he says, Lo yechalti b'oini. Ein odin shavar chilel. Ask him our balbam shkena sabah craving kema krivim. We know the carbon becomes the balmum is a pastel as well. Zar yachiach. Malazar. Now this is an easier yachiach, right? Because we just finished learning it out. Zar was the first half of the shiur. So says the Gemara, Zar could prove to you that the fact that it's not krivin makrivin, the fact that the animal, of course, doesn't have the apostles of a zar, still will be able to be apostle. Malazar shkinin lo takana. Balmum yachiach. But a zar can't be fixed. Says Mar Balmum Yechev, Chazin Larizek Rizev Larizek Rizeh, 6 lines down to Zayin of Aviz Zadashav Shebehem, Shein Mazarim, Vavdu Chilav, and Yavi Einain Shemuzar, Vimava Chilel, so we're bringing a combination of Balmum and Zar. Ask the Gemara in a very similar Shakavatara from before, Hechan Muzar, where do we see that an Einain is Muzar for performing the Avodah? If you're going to tell me, if you tell me not from the Pasik, as we asked prior. Ella mehene krivu. Learn now from him krivu ksavar aninos nisrafa, as we learned, as the Gemara answered before. Ask the Gemara, they were not hotru. There's no general patur. Says the Gemara. There's no exemption. There's no taking them out from the general rule. An Einain, however, has a case by a Kohen Gadol that would be Hutar. Says Martam Yechich. Maletame Shkin Metame. Hanachechichu. Chazradin Larizek Rizat Sadashavish Aben Shebazarin. V'chulu. So we learn out from there. I deliver Masad Shavim Shkin Lotu Mechlal. And as we just said, Eitzel Kohen Gadol v'Karbin Yachid. Shem Toma Mio Ishtari, as similar as we said before, but the Shem Toma, we see a Patur, and that's going to be our third Mikar for an Einain passing up the Avodah. A fourth Mikar, Mishasham Asi B'Kavachaymer, Yoshev. Uma Yoshev Shaichel, Ladi the carbon sitting, yet him over Chilel. Einain, Shena Eichel, in a Dinjam over Chilel. But Mali Yoshev gave Basaledas, Yeshav Chacham. Mal Shem Yoshke Bas Leidas, Shem Yoshev Loi Parach, Vimtim Slimer Parich, Asim Yoshev Umachada Mehanach Yoshev, one of the other ones, and that's going to be 4 different limudim, which really piggybacks off of the previous sugya very nicely. Einain Pasal, the Avodah by an Einain is Pasal Amar Rava Loishanu Ella, Bekarban Yachid, or smack middle of the Amid by the 2 dots. Aval Karban Simar Miratze. Says the Gemara, the din of the Mishnah, if an Einain offers a carbon, it's going to be puzzle, is only by a carbon Yachid. But carbon Sibar is going to work. How do I know? Kavachaymer meit Toma. Ma Toma Shloter Mechlala, Itzel Kain Gadol. But carbon Yachid. Hotra, it's talking about carbon Yachid, Itzel Adiyit. No, one more time. Ma Toma Shloter Mechlala, Itzel Kain Gadol, be carbon Yachid. Toma, which is not Hoter Mechlalai, by Kohen Gadol in his stam, carbon Yachid, yet Hotra, it's yes, Hutar, Itzel Adiyit, be carbon Sibor. So the kasha is Anina, Hoter Mechlalai, Itzel Kohen Gadol, be carbon Yachid. Ein Aidin, Hoter Itzel Kohen Adiyit, be carbon Sibor. But Maskala Rava Bar Ahilai. Loi Tutar Aninas, Itzel Kohen Gadol, be carbon Yachid, be Kavachaymer. Don't say what you just said. Why not? Because Ma Toma Shotu Eitzel Kohen Adiyit, B'tzibur Layotra. Excuse me, Ma Toma Shotu Eitzel Kohen Adiyit, B'tzibur Layotra Eitzel Kohen Gadol B'Karban Yachid. Aninos though Shalayotra Eitzel Kohen Adiyit B'Karban Tzibur Ein Aidin Shalayotra Eitzel Kohen Gadol B'Karban Yachid, and that's the kasha you can't learn out one from the other. It says the Gemara of Tutar Toma Eitzel Kohen Gadol B'Karban Yachid. As follows, we should say that that case itself is mutter. Uma Nino Shluta is going in Adi B'Karban Tzibur. Yet, Hotreit going Gadol B'Karban Yachid. Toma Shehotreit going Adi B'Karban Tzibur. Eino Idei Hotreit going Gadol B'Karban Yachid. So responds the Gemara. V'loi responds the Gemara. No. V'loi Tutar Tumas Eitzel going Adi B'Karban Tzibur Mikal V'Chaimer. I'll tell you to flip it around. Uma Ninos. Shot it's a coin gadol b'carbon yachid loyat loyat it's a coin hadi b'carbon sibor. Thomas shot it's a coin gadol b'carbon yachid and then shot it's a coin hadi b'carbon sibor. And that is how the Gemara leaves it. And then when we turn over, the Gemara concludes on the top of Yuzayim Aleph Alikal Mevrachachi Vikal Mevrachachi. You're right. And therefore, Kol Chada V'Chada Teiku B'Duchtei. Says the Gemara, you have kashas back and forth. So what do we do when we could ask this way or we could ask that way? Says the Gemara. So we do is we leave the Pesukim that each one is in its own place. And from the Pesukim we're going to learn that only where they're applied, and we won't say the Kal V'Chaimer. Pick it up from the Psil of Tol Yoim B'Mirtza Hashem.